Has Ferrari really solved its problems, or is it about to discover that its greatest weakness is still intact just when it matters most? Subscribe to continue uploading more of this type of content now, if we continue. Because what is at stake in Miami is not a simple improvement, it is not another evolution in the season. It is a total bet, a desperate move that could define Ferrari's entire destiny in 2026. They arrive with a deeply modified car, an SF26, that has been practically rebuilt in silence after weeks of extreme work in Maranello, with closed tests in Monza, where almost half of the car has been touched. But here's the key. All of this is born from a problem that is not yet resolved. Ferrari has pace. It has one of the best chassis on the grid. It can fight in corners with anyone, but on the straight it is losing the war. And in today's Formula One, that is a sentence. The difference in power compared to Mercedes not only makes them slower, it leaves them completely vulnerable, without the ability to attack, without the ability to defend themselves. And now, with this new package, they are trying to change everything at once. The big question is inevitable. Can a single package of improvements correct such a profound structural problem? Or are we about to see the moment in which Ferrari confirms that, despite everything, it is still one step behind? Because Miami is not just another race. It is the point where the truth will be discovered. Ferrari does not arrive in Miami as a dominant team. It arrives as a team that has seen its greatest weakness head-on and has decided to confront it with no margin for error. Because if the first races of the season made one thing clear, it is that the SF26 is not a slow car, but it is not a complete car either. And in today's Formula One, that makes the difference between fighting for victories or simply surviving the fight. It all begins with a contradiction that within Maranello has generated more doubts than certainties. In pre-season, Ferrari seemed to have absolute control. Competitive times, positive sensations, a car that responded in all scenarios. They were even able to set benchmarks that no other team reached, which fueled a clear narrative. Ferrari was ready to fight for the championship. But that illusion lasted exactly as long as it took them to face the reality of the race. When the championship really started, the SF26 began to show two completely opposite faces. On the one hand, a brilliant car in fast corners, with an aerodynamic level capable of competing directly with the best. A balanced, precise chassis that allows drivers like Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton to exploit every technical sector of the circuit. But on the other hand, a weakness that is impossible to ignore: the lack of power on the straight. And is not a minor problem. It is a structural deficit that conditions absolutely everything. The difference compared to Mercedes, estimated between 20 and 25 horsepower, completely changes the competitive behavior of the car. It's not just about being slower in a straight line, it's about losing between 7 and 8 kilometers per hour at key points on the circuit, right where overtaking, defenses, and strategies are decided. It is a disadvantage that turns every attack attempt into a risky maneuver and every defense into a practically unsustainable situation. In other words, Ferrari can get into the fight quickly, but it can't stay in it. And this is where the most critical factor of this season comes in: energy management. With the current hybrid system and the phenomenon of super clipping, cars stop receiving electrical support at the end of straights, completely exposing the real power of the engine. At that exact moment, Ferrari becomes evident. Without additional power, without enough speed, without tools to compensate, the SF26 inevitably loses ground. It is a weakness that not only affects performance, but also conditions the team's entire strategy in each race. Concern within the team escalated quickly. We are not talking about minor adjustments or natural evolution of the car. We are talking about a problem that directly threatens its position in the championship. The difference in points is already beginning to grow. And the most alarming thing is that it does not depend solely on performance on the track, but on a technical limitation that cannot be hidden. Even within the team itself, the statements reflect that tension. There is a clear awareness that if action is not taken immediately, Ferrari will not only stop fighting for the title, it could begin to go backwards. That's why Miami is not just any race. It is the moment where Ferrari decides to change its destiny. It's the point at which all the accumulated work, all the simulations, all the on-track tests become one question: can this new package transform an incomplete car into a real contender? Because the reality is that Ferrari doesn't need to be the fastest in corners, it already is. What you need is to survive on the straight, and that is exactly what is at stake now. The problem for Ferrari is that acknowledging the weakness was only the first step. Fixing it is a completely different story. Because when a team decides to modify almost half of its car in the middle of the season, it does not do so out of comfort, it does so out of urgency. And that is exactly what this package arriving in Miami represents, an aggressive intervention that seeks to change the competitive DNA of the SF26 in record time. All this movement has a very clear point of origin, the Monza filming day. It was not a simple promotional day, it was a critical test, almost a final exam before making the most important decision of the start of the season. Ferrari used the 200 kilometers allowed not to comply with protocol, but to validate a completely new concept in several areas of the car. And here's the key detail. They chose the most demanding circuit possible to do it. Monza exposes everything. The long straights, the violent braking, the need for energy efficiency is the perfect scenario to discover if you have really solved your greatest weakness or if you're simply covering it up. Ferrari knew that if the car worked there, it would have a real basis for competing in Miami. But he also knew that if he failed, there would be no room for immediate reaction. During that day, work was strategically divided between its two pilots. Charles Leclerc took the initial turn, focused on evaluating the car's overall behavior, aerodynamic balance, and stability in more controlled conditions. Then came Lewis Hamilton, in charge of pushing the car to the limit, demanding each system, especially with regard to energy management and performance in conditions closer to qualifying. And the data left by that session was positive enough to activate the next phase, taking the entire package to Miami. But the really important thing is not that the package works, but what exactly it is trying to change. Ferrari has not only worked on aerodynamics, it has directly attacked the problem from multiple fronts. On the one hand, adjustments to airflow and key elements such as the rear spoiler seek to reduce drag and improve top speed. On the other hand, the focus on energy management software aims to optimize the use of the hybrid system, trying to delay or soften the impact of super clipping that harms them so much. That is, they can't match the power of Mercedes, but they try to be more efficient with what they have. And this is where the great internal tension of the project appears. Ferrari is trying to compensate for a structural disadvantage without being able to completely eliminate it. That means that each improvement has to work in perfect harmony. If the aerodynamic balance changes too much, they can lose their cornering strength. If they push power management too hard, they can compromise reliability or performance elsewhere in the circuit. It is an extremely delicate game, where every advance has a potential cost. In addition, there is another factor that increases the pressure: time. Ferrari cannot afford a long adaptation phase. With the points difference growing in the championship, they need immediate results. Miami is not a test, it is a real race with direct consequences. Every tenth counts, every mistake pays, and every flaw in this package could confirm that the problem is deeper than they expected. That's why this act is not just about technical evolution, it's about risk. Ferrari has opted for a path that can return them to the fight or leave them permanently exposed. They have pushed their development capacity to the limit, they have compressed times, they have made aggressive decisions, all to respond to a single need: to stop being vulnerable on the straight without losing their identity on the curve. The big question now is not whether they have improved, it is whether they have improved enough. The problem for Ferrari is that there is no more room for theories, simulations, or promises. Miami is the point where everything becomes reality. Because after weeks of development, secret testing, and aggressive decisions, the time has come when SF26 has to prove whether this package is a solution or just a patch. And this is where the context becomes even more brutal. Ferrari is not competing in a vacuum. In front you have Mercedes setting the benchmark in power, customer teams that also benefit from that advantage, and a grid where every detail counts. That means that even if Ferrari improves, it's no guarantee of anything, because the rest also evolves. And in that parallel race, the time they have lost at the beginning of the season weighs more than it seems. Miami, furthermore, is not a neutral circuit to evaluate this package. It's a layout that mixes long straights with technical areas, exactly the type of scenario that exposes any unresolved weaknesses. If Ferrari has really managed to reduce its deficit in top speed, it will be noticeable here. But if the problem persists, even to a lesser extent, they will once again be trapped in the same pattern: competitive in slow sectors, vulnerable at decisive moments. And that brings us to the most important point of this entire process. Ferrari doesn't need a partial upgrade, it needs a complete balance change. Because until now, its performance has been asymmetrical, very strong in curves, clearly inferior in straight lines. This package seeks to break that dynamic, but doing so without losing its greatest strength is what truly defines success or failure. The risk is obvious. If they have prioritized top speed too much, they may have compromised downforce and cornering, which was precisely what kept them competitive. If the balance of the car becomes more unstable, the drivers will lose confidence, and in Formula One that translates directly into lap time. But if they haven't gone far enough, they will remain an incomplete car, unable to fight on equal terms. This is where the human factor comes in, which is often underestimated. Both Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton arrive in Miami with an enormous responsibility. Not only do they have to extract the maximum from a car, they have to validate all the team's work in real conditions. Your sensations, your decisions on the track, your ability to adapt, everything influences how this package will be interpreted and developed in the next races. Because Miami is not the end of the road, it is the beginning of a new phase. And there is another element that cannot be ignored, the impact on the championship. Ferrari already has a significant points difference, and that completely changes the pressure. They can't afford low-key weekends. They need results, they need to close the gap, they need to send a clear message that they are still in the fight. If this package works, they don't just improve the car, they change the narrative of the season. But if it fails, the consequence is not only technical, it is psychological. Therefore, the Miami GP does not just define a race, it defines a direction. It defines whether Ferrari has taken the necessary step to fight for the title or whether, despite all the effort, it continues to chase its rivals from behind. And that is where the last reflection remains. Ferrari has already made its most aggressive move of the season. Now, the question isn't what they're going to do, it's how far it's going to take them. Subscribe to continue uploading more of that content. Now you really think about all this.